Welcome to Hoarding Stuff. Join Heather Matuozzo as she peers behind the piles, digs into the research, and gets the conversation started, opening up the misunderstood world of hoarding behaviour. Right, this evening, which is evening for me, but morning for you, I'm talking to Christiana Bratiosis, who is Associate Professor of the School of Social Work at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, which is why it's her morning and my evening. And we're talking about a project that was run in Vancouver last year, looking at how cities tackle hoarding. And I've already spoken to Kate, who was a researcher on this project. But I wanted to talk to Christiana for two reasons. One, because she was kind enough to mentor me when I very first set up years ago. And I hadn't spoken to her for ages. And so this was a good excuse. And then also to talk to her about this project. So I'm going to hand over to you now, Christiana, if you can tell us a bit about the project and how it was born, and also the centre in which you work, which sounds fascinating.
Sure. Thank you very much, Heather. It's fun to talk with you. So this manuscript that was written is the result of many years of a collaboration between the UBC Center for Collaborative Research on Hoarding, Vancouver Fire and Rescue Services, and Vancouver Coastal Health, which is our regional health authority. And so the partnership has been very long-standing. In fact, more than 5 years, we have had an embedded researcher on that team, and that person, of course, Kate. And so, excuse me, the center is really a place where, along with my colleague, Dr. Sheila Woody, who is a professor in the Department of Psychology, we are forwarding several pieces of research, quantitative and qualitative projects that are aimed at understanding community-based responses to hoarding. So we have some permanent staff with us. We also have a number of graduate students, Kate being one of them, and we have a number of undergraduate students that work with us as well. And so this effort, Sheila and I have been in the same location now in Vancouver for 3 years, but she and I have been working together since 2013, actually, as research colleagues. So this How to Tackle Hoarding paper really is an outgrowth of our center and the collaboration with the City of Vancouver Fire and Rescue and Vancouver Coastal Health.
Oh, wow, that's good. So that gives hope for us then. If we keep going, hopefully we can have a centre for looking at hoarding as well. That would be heaven.
Yes.
I noticed when I was reading about the project that you didn't include training of the staff that were involved in the project. Can you explain why you didn't train anybody?
So this project actually, we were solely the researchers on this project. That's our role in the collaboration is as researchers, and the data collection, which Kate reported on, actually started before I arrived in Vancouver, and was sort of a retrospective collection of data based on an already established collaboration between Fire and Rescue Services and the Vancouver Coastal Health nurse. And so it is my understanding, and I know actually firsthand, that the nurse who was part of the team had attended a few community-based trainings on hoarding. I wouldn't call it systematic training, but I certainly know that he had more than the basics. He also was trained in mental health. He was a mental health nurse, and so he understood disorders more broadly. When I arrived in Vancouver, Sheila and I did do a training with the HEART team, the Hoarding Action Response Team, which is at the center of this intervention effort. It was a day-long training. So again, whatever can be accomplished in that minimal amount of time, but But I think largely the collaboration that makes the Heart team, this combination of fire and nursing, was really about people bringing their expertise from their own discipline, and the person who was the nurse on this team having more training in hoarding made sense, because the fire official actually only was always accompanied by the nurse, and had the benefit of the nurses' expertise as they intervened, and then of course learned as they went along. All of that being said, certainly my belief is that when setting up any kind of collaboration for community-based intervention, that initial training and ongoing training and consultation ongoing would be a critical element for community-based interventions. And I really emphasize that ongoing consultation, because as people go out in the field and start to work, they can have all the training in the world, but then the novel situation emerges and they don't have anyone else to turn to say, oh dear, what do I do in this situation? And that's where I think having a consultation team, or at least consultation meetings with one or two other people, can be very helpful.
No, I agree, because I think this is where, when you get to very difficult situations, sometimes if you do sit around a table, there's lots of other ideas that people might have, whereas when you're on your own, or you feel that you're on your own, sometimes you can get stuck. So I think definitely this sort of multi-agency discussion is extremely useful, as long as you're looking for solutions, if you know what I mean.
Yes, of course.
Because I have sat in some meetings where everybody's like, no. It's really, it's like doors are shut. But I think if everybody's looking, it's like, oh, what about, oh, this might be a silly suggestion. You go, no, there's no silly suggestions. Let's have a look at things, because that's how sort of interesting innovations come about, I think, as well.
That's right. And the sharing of resources that some people might not even know exist because of their own disciplinary perspective. And I think that's part of the brilliance of the Hoarding Action Response Team in Vancouver, is that it was this two-person team of people who really see the world so differently, fire and nurse, mental health nurse, and yet they became just this fantastic intervention team.
Oh yes, I can imagine. I think that's, I work very closely with the fire service, and there's just sort of there are firefighters here that are called complex needs officers. And so they are the ones that go to the more vulnerable clients, and so they're the ones that I end up working with, and the majority of them are just fabulous. They're proper extra mile people.
Yes.
And they're just great. And also, they don't, in the UK anyway, they don't have statutory power, so they can't enforce things. They can just help to prevent fires.
I see.
So they have a sort of, they've just got people sort of are not frightened of them. I think they're very reassuring.
Yes.
That they can't then enforce anything, whereas sometimes environmental health officers can enforce, housing officers can enforce, social workers can enforce, but firefighters can't. And I think that's to their frustration, I'm sure, sometimes. But yes, I worked really well with them, and the clearance people that I'm using are headed up by an ex-firefighter.
Wow.
Well, ex as in he's retired, and he's just very passionate about this. And so I said, you don't think you're retiring, do you? Think again.
It's lovely.
He retired far too young anyway. It's far too young. He needs to be occupied, otherwise he'll just go stale. So and have any significant changes been made then to the way that you operate, or is it sort of organically just grown and learnt from, you know, doing projects? Or can you think of anything really key that has changed from one way of doing it to a new way of doing it?
Yeah, at the time of the inception of the Heart team, there were actually three sort of branches, two within the city of Vancouver, one being fire and rescue services, and the other being property use, which is building inspection essentially, and then the health piece was always there, but the health piece didn't always have the current position. It had more, it was not always a nurse, it was more case management level folks who were in the home doing much more sorting and discarding work. And over time, you can imagine, so the Heart team receives its referrals through 311 in the city of Vancouver. So anyone can call that line and themselves, concerned family members, concerned neighbors, anyone can phone and say, I'm worried about a case of hoarding. And so when you have a citywide access point like that, you can imagine that the list for service becomes extraordinarily long very quickly. And that was true. And so one of the things in order to make it manageable and to meaningfully respond to cases was that the position shifted a little bit, and also the scope of what the Heart team took on really changed over time. So we have in the city of Vancouver an extraordinary number of single room occupancy housing. And there were a number a constant number of requests for service in SRO housing, and the Heart team was just overwhelmed by that, and also was being a bit overwhelmed by strata requests for service. And so they put some scoping around what they would and wouldn't do, where they could and couldn't respond to hoarding. And then the fire and rescue services took up those pieces that kind of fell away under their own jurisdictional powers to respond to hoarding.
Yeah. And so because you worked with people that were on the cluster image rating of 6+, is that right?
Yeah, so anything 5 or greater on the clutter image rating scale is considered of interest to Vancouver Fire and Rescue and the Heart team, but it has to be in combination. I'm sure Kate explained this, with constellation of other concerns, and that is not just clutter volume, but what are the concerns related to the person in that hoarded environment. And so that also created some criteria for what cases would be responded to and what cases needed to be turfed somewhere else by the Heart team. So the current structure, where there is a nurse and a fire official, is an evolution, and the property use piece fell away over time, in part because what was learned is that the fire and the nurse are really the central agents, and then from there the network of services that become involved in a case is different, as you well know, in every case, and property use became one in the network. They weren't central to every intervention, but as needed, the Heart team would then involve them.
Right, so property use is housing, is it?
It's actually making sure it's bylaw enforcement or regulatory mandate enforcement around properties, largely focused on exterior of properties, though sometimes also focused on interior of properties.
I see. Right. Oh no, that's great.
Yes.
And so what next?
Well, one more time, the Heart team is in a period of transition. The nurse that has worked with the team and provided a great deal of stability over many years has taken a new assignment. And so the health authority is just considering how they're going to restructure and the new assignment for that position. The health authority also has a peer response team for hoarding. It's a group of peers, people in recovery, who are not just from hoarding, but from a wide range of psychiatric and social problems, who are providing in-home not during COVID time, but in-home
Yes.
assistance around hoarding. And so that team will likely become a greater part of the heart team response. But it really is, you're catching me in this conversation at a real moment of transition again for the heart team. But I think, you know, Heather, as we both know, the changes in funding and organizational and governmental structure means that these things are always a bit amorphous, and that they have to change in order to meet not only the current demands, but the resourcing available and the systems in which they exist. And so that's where things are at present moment.
Right. So the peer led team, are they volunteers or are they funded? Are they paid?
Well, they're paid, actually, and there's a small team of them, and they work with case managers who are professional positions within the health authority, and they also have some clinical folks on that team. I have done a good number of hours of training with that peer team to help get them ready and to support them as they go into the homes. And they've taken up that training really well, and I think very much enjoy the work. Find it deeply challenging, of course, but enjoy the work with people with lived experience of hoarding.
No, that's great. Well, we've got some. I invite people, if they often people offer themselves to be ambassadors. So they're the sort of the peer-led people that have been experts by experience, and there's certainly one lady who is working with some of the people in the project, but she came to a support group, and so she's sort of over the other side, and when she got over the other side said, this is what I want to do.
Nice.
Which is fantastic. And so she's worked really successfully with one lady who's now, it's going to touch her turn to become, you know, and this is just heaven, really.
Yes.
To see people do this, but to see that, you know, the one lady has worked with the other one and inspired her, and she's got to a point where she's saying, this is what I want to do in the future. Another mum who said, oh, this has been so awful. Anything you want me to talk to people about, please let me talk to them, because I don't want them to get where I was, you know?
Yeah.
So yes, I just think they are really powerful people to have help the next generation, you know. I think they're the best ones.
Really, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, they're an essential part of they're just another collaborator, really, in the intervention process. Yeah.
No, that's it. Oh, well, that's great. Well, thank you for your time. I just want to talk to you for 2 seconds when I've turned off the recording, but sure. I'm really grateful, and it's so lovely to get to talk to you again. I'm not going to let it be another 10 years.
Okay, really... good.
Anyway, thank you very much, Christiana.
Sure.